You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is June 25th, 2024, and this is the sixth installment of Hearted Lite, a series where we hear edited versions of interviews from the past 5 years of Lighthearted. Today's interview was first heard in episode 48 in early 2020. The guest is author Lenore Skomal. Ida Lewis was possibly the most famous lighthouse keeper in American history. She was born in Newport, Rhode Island in 1842. She became the official keeper at Lime Rock in Newport Harbor in 1879 and held the position for 32 years. Officially, Ida Lewis is credited with 18 lives saved, but the number was possibly as high as 35. The modest Ida kept no records of her life-saving exploits. Ida became a celebrated national heroine. The former Lime Rock Lighthouse is now the Ida Lewis Yacht Club, and in 1995 a Coast Guard buoy tender was named in her honor. Writer Lenore Skomal is the winner of multiple awards for literature, biography, and humor. Her book on Ida Lewis, The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter, was originally published in 2002. Booklist called it, quote, a sensitive biography, a remarkable story of an ordinary woman who did some extraordinary things, unquote. This interview was conducted by phone, which explains the less than perfect audio. In spite of that, I feel it's definitely worth revisiting. So let's listen to this edited version of my interview with Lenore Skomal now. What led you to write a book on Ida Lewis in the first place?
It was really geography, actually, because I grew up in Connecticut, and my sister ended up going to college in Newport. Going up there to visit her, that's when I was introduced to Ida Lewis, but realized that there were many conflicting reports about her, and she sort of was this larger-than-life person, almost like a Paul Bunyan, where I wasn't really sure if she existed or not. And that's when I started my research and realized there was no definitive account of her life, much less a full biography.
1869 seems to be the year when Ida Lewis fever kind of reached its peak, and she made the cover of Harper's Weekly and all kinds of things. Why do you think the Ida Lewis fever, or Ida Lewis mania kind of reached a crescendo in 1869?
Well, 1869 was when she actually became famous. Nobody had actually heard of her outside of Newport, I'm sure, until then, because she was just the daughter of a lighthouse keeper. She didn't have any position there. Her father was pretty much listed as the lighthouse keeper, and her mom was the one that was actually taking care of the light, along with Ida, who was the eldest of 4 children. What happened were 2 soldiers. They had foolishly, in the middle of a gale, and this was in March, they had hired a young boy to take them across in a skiff, and that would have taken them past the lighthouse to Fort Adams, which was an active fort at the time. And they had been drinking, and the boat capsized. The boy actually drowned, and Ida's mother saw the boat capsize. Ida jumped into her boat in the middle of this and rowed out and rescued the 2 men, and brought them back to the lighthouse. Now, how from that, and that happened on March 29th of 1869. The first blurb that I could find that ran in the newspaper, which was the Providence newspaper, which is, very close to Newport, was on March 30th. And that's when it ran a small little blurb saying this sad incident occurred where this young boy died, but the lighthouse keeper's daughter rescued these 2 soldiers. And from that moment, after that, you can see, if you do the research, it's just tens and then 20s and then hundreds of articles start appearing about her from March 30th to April 11th. So all of a sudden it blows up overnight that this 28-year-old flight woman rescued these 2 soldiers. And so by the time we hit July, 4th of July, Newport had renamed it Ida Lewis Day instead of the 4th of July. And they had a parade, and then everything just went crazy from there on in. And I still can't get over it. The amount of attention she got from being a veritable unknown to being an international heroine. It's astounding, even by today's standards, where we have, obviously the internet and Twitter and Instagram and all of that. She was like a Kardashian. I mean, she was so well known. It was, and I hate to, parallel that because she was literally a heroine. But yeah, it was outstanding. It was outstanding what happened. And her life was changed forever because of that.
We know that officially she rescued at least 18 people, but most people think the number was quite a bit higher, probably more than 30. You just mentioned one of her most famous rescues, the one that really propelled her to fame, but do you have a couple of, maybe one or two other rescues that really stand out in your mind among her all the rescues that she did in her career?
Yes, there are several. The ones that are documented, which are in the book, which are very interesting. One, she rescued a sheep. I mean, it was two people and a sheep, which was very funny because she had to, I'm sure she didn't have much exposure to farm animals, but it had taken off and jumped into the bay, and so she had to row out and kind of lash it to the side of the boat. And it was August Belmont's prize sheep. So if it had been lost, there would have been hell to pay. But my favorite rescue is the one that actually won her the Congressional Medal of Honor, Life-Saving Medal of Honor, because it was, honestly, after reading all the deposition, because they did that before, obviously, you got any type of recognition from the federal government. After reading the actual deposition, I was able to, it was actually bone-chilling because she almost died. I mean, she could have easily died in any of these, actually, but this one in particular. But it was in February of 1881. It froze over. Back then, the bay would freeze over. And so, again, we have two soldiers. They're inebriated. They're coming from town. They want to take a shortcut rather than walk the length of the land to the little peninsula that stuck out where the fort was. And they cut across. And as they were cutting across, they fell into the water. And Ida was sick at the time. She while she was very hardy, she did have problems with her lungs. And so she would get lung infections, and she was sitting by the fire barefoot, and she was trying to take a steam, and she saw them go in, and she realized she had to run out. She ran out barefoot, or in her stocking feet, actually, and with no coat. She grabbed the clothesline that she was using for the lawn that would have been used for the laundry in the summertime, and she ran across the ice to rescue them. They were both immersed in the water. And pulling anybody from that type of a position, as you can imagine, where they have no leverage to help hoist themselves out, and they're panicking because they didn't swim. A lot of people didn't swim. You're also fighting against hypothermia and a variety of other factors, as well as the storm going on. She was able to get both of them out. And one of them actually pulled her in with them, and she was able to get herself out and then get him out. And so she rescued both of those two men and brought them over to the lighthouse. And but she got very, very ill after that, quite frankly. She got pneumonia. But it was one of those rescues that you think to yourself, could I have actually ever done that? I mean, when you think of all the factors that were against this woman, and again, she wasn't a large woman. She was very slight. So the fact that she was able to pull that off, she always attributed that to God. She said, you have the might when you need it. And she said, so the good Lord gave it to me when I needed it. So it's an incredible story and one of my favorites.
Besides its maritime history, Newport's largely known for its kind of high society, the Vanderbilts and the Astors and all the famous wealthy families that built the so-called cottages there. Ida didn't have much education and certainly didn't come from an upper-class background. What kind of relationship did she have to those wealthy people in Newport?
Her relationship, honestly, with the Vanderbilts and the Astors and that ilk, the folks that owned the big mansions, and all those mansions started being built, quite frankly, around the time she would have been in her 40s. She didn't really have a relationship with them in terms of she didn't go to tea. It was pretty much a caste system back then because she was from a working class family. Women didn't work. I mean, she clearly worked. She loved to work. But an interesting note, which in doing the research, I uncovered that she actually did have a relationship with Elsie Vanderbilt, who would have been 38 years her junior. And Elsie lived across from the lighthouse. Literally, Ida would have been on her front lawn if she crossed over the street when she rode to shore. There was a beautiful estate that her husband had built for her when she married him. Alfred Vanderbilt was her husband, and he was the great-grandson of Cornelius, and it was called Harbor View, and it was a beautiful estate that's no longer standing. But Elsie lived there with her young child, and that she would go across and she would spend time with Ida. And they did develop a friendship. And in fact, when she passed away, Elsie was one of the people that came across to witness her body and to help bring it back. So I don't know much about the relationship because, again, there are no real letters that are penned, but it seemed very interesting to me because everybody else from that tier of society would have treated Ida like a tourist attraction. She was a reason to come to Newport to see this famous woman, and people would come to see her and not invited. They would just row up to the island and jump out and expect to be given a tour and to be talked to, even though Ida had quite a few responsibilities. And so it was an interesting time because when you think about it, if someone just kept, if you had 8,000 people come to your door over the course of 3 months over a summertime, you wouldn't get much done. You'd also be highly annoyed. So Ida found a way to really get something from that. She started charging people. She would have small photographs or postcards of herself, and she would charge them. You like a picture? Here, 30 cents. You want me to give you a tour of the lighthouse? Happy to do it. That'll be 50 cents. So she was able to monetize it a little bit for herself, and she got criticized for that. But when you think about it, why not make some money off your fame? Everybody else was. So we start to see another side of her, which was very interesting, and that's come to light in this new batch of research where Ida did try. They had no money. I mean, they were dirt poor. Her father made $450 a year as a lighthouse keeper, and he had to support 4 children, a wife, and that he was infirmed, and there was no pension at the time. There was no medical insurance. He had a stroke, and he was pretty much incapable of moving.
One of the great mysteries of Ida's life was her marriage, her 1870 marriage to William Hurd Wilson of Fairfield, Connecticut. She moved briefly to Black Rock, Connecticut with him, but we don't know a whole lot. In fact, we know virtually nothing about that period in her life, and I actually know you've been trying to research that a little more lately. Could you comment on that?
Oh, happy to do it. It's been the bane of my existence for 20 years, but not being able to piece this thing together. Thankfully, thanks again to the internet. And quite frankly, we actually just moved to Black Rock, oddly. Now, that's quite a coincidence. I physically moved here 3 months ago and connected myself with some folks that are local historians, folks and Bruce Williams and Phil. And so I reconnected with them, and Bruce is an avid researcher, and he's been quite helpful in sort of tracing the Wilson line, which would have been her husband's family line, which extends back to the pre-Revolutionary War. So that being said, what I'm starting to get is a much fuller picture. Ida did indeed marry him in 1870. She did indeed move here. We don't know for how long she was here, but I don't think it was 2 years. We had initially thought it was 2 years because she would have moved back when her father passed away. But according to the research I'm finding I think she moved back a lot sooner. Mm-hmm. It was an unhappy marriage, and that has been abundantly documented. We don't exactly know why, other than that he would not support her. He did not, I don't know if he was actually working at the time when they married. I know for a fact he wasn't right before. He was a mariner, but we're not quite certain what that means. We know, was he a for-hire mariner? How did they meet? Those things we don't really know. He did not write and he did not read, which is interesting. So in my mind, even though he may have had more money than she had and had family lineage, quite frankly, she was the one that was the breadwinner. And knowing her as we've come to know her, she wanted nothing to do with that. He had to pull his own weight. So we know that was one of the reasons that the marriage ended, except they never divorced. We have absolutely no proof that they divorced. Right. She actually still went by the name Wilson up until the time she died, and all the census prove, it'll say Wilson. And I don't really know why that was. Originally, I thought it was for religious reasons because she was temperate. She wasn't a drinker. She was part of the Temperance League. She was a Methodist. So I thought, maybe it was religious. But now I'm beginning to wonder if it was just one of those things. And I also feel that she wanted privacy about that particular matter. She was used to having her life sort of under the microscope. And I think when it came to this, she didn't really want to malign him, nor did she it was a personal thing. It was her marriage. And so we have no idea, if he was abusive, if there was drinking involved, I have nothing. And I'm trying to find some more information about that. But yeah, it continues to be a little bit of a mystery, but at least we know he existed. We know more about him. We know about his family. So it's starting to color in the details.
Yeah, yeah. So late in her life, Ida was reprimanded by government officials for not doing her paperwork correctly. That really hurts to read about that. That had to be very stressful.
I would agree with that, and it was stressful. She was getting on in years. She was in her 60s, and she could have made a mistake. But this is a person who's very meticulous, who prided herself, in her ability to do her job well, had been doing it for over 50 years, for goodness sake. But there was a lot, and you can speak to this more than I, but there were changes in management and the way things were done. There was electrification that was coming about. There were rumors, too, that they were going to, the Lighthouse was going to be
discontinued or
deactivated. Yeah, but the reprimand, especially from someone who was her junior, and I saw the letter that was written to her, and it was very disrespectful. It was very curt, and it would have hurt my feelings, and I can't imagine it didn't her. And that I think she took very deeply. And I think that, quite frankly, her life had changed a lot. She was no longer really famous. There wasn't that same respect that was given to her. She had sort of fallen off the map somewhat. And quite frankly, after she passed away, that's when all of a sudden she became back in vogue. The obits and the accolades and everything that happened after she died. It's a little bit sad because that's the type of thing that she really deserved. She was one of those rare people that was able to see herself become famous in her own lifetime and somewhat enjoy that fame, but at the same time fall out of measure and even be ridiculed and made fun of. She died in 1911.
Yeah.
And that latter part of her life, the last 5-6 years, you see a smattering of small little anecdotes and barbs in the local newspapers of, Ida Lewis, all she can do is, play the wash tub or something. It's like just boys would go out and pretend to be drowning. And so that, she'd go out to rescue them and find out it was a joke. So there was some unkind, cruel things that she had to witness as well. And I think all of that was brought to bear, on her stamina, on her outlook on life. For all we know, she could have been depressed, and her brother inasmuch says so. So, yes, it was the reprimand. It was the changing, is the light going to be deactivated? Probably one of the reasons why she got sick. We don't know, but in the end, it wasn't happy, and it is. It's sad, and it's sad that her life kind of ended that way.
Yeah.
After such an illustrious, glorious career.
Yeah, and she died at 69, which is not a tremendously advanced age, and I would think that the stress added to that, for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. What for you is the most fascinating thing about Ida Lewis, and why should people remember her?
I think I always joke that I know Ida Lewis' life better than my own. I mean, I don't even remember what date I graduated college, but so I can give you names and dates. But yet I don't really know Ida Lewis. She continues to be an enigma. What's so fascinating about her life, obviously her catapult to fame. But what's more fascinating to me is the fact that she was completely forgotten in our national memory until I wrote the book. And I don't take credit for that. I just feel like it was astounding to me that someone who was so famous, who did so much, who was a very courageous, not seeking fame, brave woman, true to her morals, true to what she believed to be true, was summarily forgotten by our country. That to me was what's so fascinating, is why didn't I know about her when I was going to school and I was learning about everybody else who made this country great? Why didn't I ever hear about her?
Did writing the book on Ida Lewis turn you into a Lighthouse buff, would you say?
I'm going to leave that to you, Jeremy, and the fans, because just a quick anecdote. When I was doing the original book tour 20 years ago, and I was going up and down the coastline, and I had a lot of chances to interact with Lighthouse enthusiasts and aficionados. A lot of people who came to my book talk really wanted to learn more about lighthouses or knew a lot about lighthouses. And so interestingly enough, there would come a point in the Q&A where someone would ask a question about a Fresnel lens or something, and I would be blank stare. And I would just look to the audience and just say, anybody here? And sure enough, there'd be 5 or 6 lighthouse enthusiasts that could answer the question, and it became very lively discussion, and I would learn so much more from them than I had to learn for the book. So, I love Ida Lewis, but I have to say I fall short when it comes to lighthouse enthusiast or aficionado. I admire what you do, and I admire, people that love lighthouses, because that's what kept them as, part of our national treasure. You could imagine if people didn't really love these, what would happen to them. And it's such an important part of our history and our maritime history. So hats off to you and all of those that are listening to your podcast, because you have a huge part to play in preservation and conservation of these memories.
Thank you. And again, you've made a tremendous contribution to Lighthouse history with your book on Ida Lewis. And I thank you. Thank you, Lenore. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Lenore Skomal's book, Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter, The Remarkable True Story of American Heroine Ida Lewis, is available from Amazon and other online booksellers. Once when she was asked about her rescues, Ida Lewis said, quote, "I don't know if I was ever afraid. I just went, and that was all there was to it," unquote. She also once said, quote, "There's a piece on this rock that you don't get on shore. There are hundreds of boats going in and out of this harbor in summer, and it's part of my happiness to know that they are depending on me to guide them safely," unquote. We will be back this Sunday with a regular episode of Lighthearted. Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn about all the things the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers. For now, to all our listeners, keep a good light.